So it's about as simple as it gets. I mean, really, the worship small group serving, very little extra. So I would say we're actually in the process of mapping it out. So it's like, here's what it looks like. I would say it's getting someone in worship, getting someone into a large group, ultimately into a small group, ultimately leading a group. Getting them into the serving aspect of stuff, volunteering inside the church and outside the church. Really seeing them even encounter Jesus, be welcomed with compassion, changed by God, sent to embrace the people around them. So, I mean, I would say in a nutshell, that is it. Like, and reaching the next person for Jesus is like if you had to say, sum up what Embrace is all about, I would say that. And that includes all four of those things. It's not just getting somebody's butt in the seats. No, it's seeing them walk through those different things and seeing them changed. I would say also another step of it, and none of this it's getting them into the Word. So helping them get into the Bible. It's if they've never been baptized, getting them baptized, reaffirming their baptism, tithing end of things, helping them to realize the unique gifts that they've been given to use inside and outside the church. We don't, serving-wise, we're trying to figure out what that looks like. So we've had a really good partnership with a mission in Haiti, which has been awesome. I still am trying to figure out how this works. What we've done since day one is we've encouraged people to do what God puts on your heart. So oftentimes God will speak to us and then we'll pawn it off to somebody else to do. It's like, man, I feel called to help single dads. I feel man, every time I read the Bible, I just feel like single dads are left behind. Usually what we do is we go to the pastor then and say, I really feel called to reach single dads. Will you reach single dads? Yeah. Would you try to reach single dads? And this Discipleship Wise is a huge piece that I've always taken pride in. What I say is I want to totally affirm you are hearing from God. Like, I think He cares about single dads. And so I just want to challenge you to go do it. Well, what? Like, I thought, is this church not deep enough? That's what's interesting, is that will come out. No, this church is actually really, really deep. So you're going to go do it. Like, you're clearly hearing from God. Just go make it happen. And that rubs, I'm trying to not be jaded, a Pharisee the wrong way, because they want you to do it for them. And what's much more difficult, and this is, Becky and I have nothing figured out. Up until a month ago, our back neighbor was one of the most active drug dealers in Sioux Falls, and he was also on the sex offender list. And by the way, I have 4 kids. Mm-hmm. What does it look like to show Paul as his name, Jesus? Oh, that sounds like discipleship, you know? And and by the way, most of the people who are showing up to the house, they're throwing literally a bag of trash, not because they know us or hate us, all over your yard every single day, including needles and that kind of stuff. And that's discipleship, is just living in that. Because I think oftentimes, again, our culture today wants to do some cute things and then post it all over Facebook, instead of just actually, no, why don't you move? Like, I'm so grateful God came and He made His home among us. And so what does that look like for us to actually do that? And it's been hard. I mean, it's been brutal at times. Even the other night, so my son's Ethiopian, and we have a high population of Native Americans in our neighborhood. And I'm going to guess, if I had to, I'm going to judge here, I would estimate 70% of the Native Americans that walk by our house are completely intoxicated, to the point of laying on our sidewalk in the middle of the day. I mean, one of the greatest epidemics right now is the Native population. The suicide rate, we have the highest rate of suicide in South Dakota, I think, in the country, because of the reservations. I mean, insane numbers. So even a guy from my church, I've just been talking with him. He's an advocate for the Native community. Aaron Poorbears, his name, is talking with him. The other night, I'm with my Ethiopian son, and he's like, we're walking, he's like, Dad, do you think that guy's drunk? There was a Native man walking. And I was like, I don't know. I said, buddy, like, one thing I'd encourage you to always do is, like, judge a person by the person that they are instead of what color they are. Again, interesting saying it to an African American. And he's like, well, most of them are drunk. And I was like, okay, never, I'm glad you don't have Facebook. So, but I was like, buddy, I said, you're right. I was like, most of them are drunk, but I was like, that doesn't mean that every one of them is drunk. And I was like, and also like, just some of the things that the specific people in our neighborhood have lived through is like led to that. It's not because of who they are, it's because a lot of stuff they've grown up in. And I said, there's a lot of people who will make judgments about people that have skin like your color. And he's like, what does that mean? And I said, well, everything from like, oh, he must be a really good athlete. And he's like, really? And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, I'm guessing people even see you on your flag football team. You're the only person that doesn't like white peeling and burnt like me. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, and so like I said, it's always really important just to judge a person by who they are. And you only get to do that by talking with them and getting to know who they are. And so just to wrestle through that, even with Wilson, and his wheels are turning 7,000 miles an hour, like, what does that mean? And so, but that's discipleship. And that's where the rubber meets the road, and loving the person who does throw needles all over your yard, like Jesus. When you're just like, can you just please pick up your trash? You know, that's what you want to say to him. And so it's just an interesting thing. But that's, like, I'm like, what I keep saying from the stage is when you begin to live differently right where God has you, that's when a piece of heaven shows up. That's when the kingdom of God shows up. Instead of doing something at a church where you do a cute warm fuzzy that 5 out of the 50 people that attend the church do anything, it's like, what happens if we really begin to activate people to live differently right where they are, to start reaching out. My friend Aaron said, I said, how do I minister to the Native community? He's like, Adam, you just being the white guy that you are, the outgoing guy that you are, the fact that you acknowledge them when they walk by and ask how they're doing and talk with them, he's like, you're turning their worlds upside down of what they know about you as a white guy. And I said, really? And he's like, just you talking to them? He's like, you are changing. He's like, their wheels are just like, and so he said, just keep doing that. And he's like, sooner or later, they're going to say like, hey, want to connect, want to whatever. And like the relationships that we've even formed have been incredible. But it's been hard conversations though. Yeah, it's messy, but that's life. And I think that's Jesus a little bit too. Even talking the other day, there was 3 Native kids that came up and said, who's he? And I was like, oh, he's my son. No, he's not. And I was like, no, actually, he is. No, he's not. And Wilson, as soon as that happens, Wilson's head just almost explodes because he's just like identity crisis like every time it happens. So I'm like, okay, change the subject. I'm like, so then I asked the question that I regretted asking later. I was like, hey, tell me about your dads. Innocent question, not a good question to ask. Mm-hmm. And so one of them's like, I've never met my dad. And I was like, oh man, I'm sorry about that. And Wilson right away, where's your dad? And I was like, and then they're like, yeah, he did something and he's in prison. And I was like, oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. Another kid pipes up, my dad, he's got like a bracelet on his leg that's got like glowing lights on it. And I'm like, I could Wilson's ears, and I'm like, no questions. So I was like, that's kind of cool. And they're like, yeah, it like blinks and stuff. And I was like, I don't have a bracelet on my leg. And they're like, well, we'll see you guys later. And I was like, so they left, and Wilson's like, why does he got a bracelet on his leg? I thought only girls wear bracelets on their legs. And I was like, buddy, sometimes when you make a bad decision, like they have bracelets on your legs to kind of help make you make good decisions. And so like, it's just like messy as all get out sometimes, but I love that we can have those conversations. And I love even for our kids, they're seeing it and asking hard questions at a young age and hopefully becoming more like Jesus even when it's hard. So it's not all glamorous, especially when there's lots. I mean, the needles and stuff like that. We've had to tell our kids, hey, you see one of these? You tell mom and dad, because we just don't want you to get stuck by one, because this is really, really sharp, and sometimes it has stuff that you don't want to get in you. And so just that kind of conversation is weird to have with your 6-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
So
when you said about the folks coming to you and you turn it, go and help the single dads or whatever. So for you, if I'm hearing that right, just in your culture and the way that you formed that, so it's not like, well, yeah, you can start a ministry to single dads from Embrace Church. It's like, go find a place to help single dads, right? Like, so it's not like that's your, like that's how you've done that. And so like in that serve place, you aren't within your structure trying to create places from your church where you're you're like, go find a place in the community to serve. Like that's sort of what you've done.
Yep. So and we go in waves. So again, we have the connection with the thing in Haiti.
Yeah.
We just had a partnership come to an end with something that was providing school for kids in other countries. It was amazing. Like literally this year, I think we've put probably 3,000 kids in school in Guatemala and Kenya and whatever. Mm-hmm. So unbelievable type stuff. Yeah. I think we're going to kind of develop that relationship with Haiti. We built a school that's ran by Haitians, and it's genuinely changed this village. Yeah. It's just like this in a long-term, self-sustaining way where we're not the savior. Right. They, with God's help, are helping themselves. But really, yeah, and they can create a small group. So like something very personal to me is adoption. My sister, I've known I was going to adopt since I was 2 when my sister came from South Korea. Mm-hmm. And so one of the non-negotiables in dating was, hey, just so you know, I'm going to adopt a kid at some point. So I just knew we couldn't do it ourselves. Adoption, what often doesn't get heard about is how hard adoption is after you adopt a kid. Usually all you hear about is the money and paying for it. It's hard. I mean, on a daily basis, it's an interesting thing with Wilson. He just got a lot of pain inside of him and hurt. And so I've wanted an adoption group, but I haven't wanted to start it. So there's a couple that finally decided, hey, we're going to lead this group. It's not a ministry. It's just a group around adoption. And now they meet once a month, so it's not weekly, even once a month. And their first time they had, I want to say 60 people there, just with people who are considering fostering or doing fostering, adoption, were adopted. One lady shared her story. She was adopted as a little girl and then gave up her first adoption as a senior in high school. Okay. And so that was a powerful story to hear that. I was like, she got done. I told her, I said, Wendy, I think that's one of the most powerful stories I've ever heard in my life, to be that impacted. And they have an amazing relationship with their daughter that they gave up. And it went into this amazing family. I mean, it's like unbelievable. So yeah, it's like even the single dad thing. Yeah. Maybe it's a group that you start for single dads. And it's just a place like, hey, childcare, we're going to pool money. Childcare is covered. And so just as fellas, we're going to connect for an hour and pour into you so you can be a better man and a better dad. Instead of creating this ministry that's now on us. Right. It's like you are the church. Yeah, that you are the church.
So that falls into your group's system, whatever that is.
Serving groups, yeah.
In some way. So it's like actually not a separate system for like ministry.
It's not.
Like within your group.
Within it. And the coolest thing when that's on high octane is hearing about all kinds of cool God stuff. Mm-hmm. And you don't hear about it until after it's all done. Mm-hmm. And as a pastor, there's nothing better. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, we just adopted this family and they're a refugee family. We have one family that's been at Embrace for, 7 years because a small group adopted their family and helped them. And now the Amisi family all comes to Embrace. And at the time, away from my son, they were the only white people there. And I mean, but it's home. They would never go to another church, because they feel forever grateful for what Embrace has done. And I'm like, we didn't even do anything. It was this group that helped you. Yeah. And still now the friendships and relationships. He comes up to me every week. His name's Laurent. Always shakes hand. I love you, Pastor. And I'm like, I love you too, Laurent. And so it's just amazing how that happens. But as a church, usually it's this huge burden on the church and on a pastor specifically. And again, we should be living it out. We need to be doing it ourselves. So it's not just like, oh yeah, the church is doing it. No, what about you guys? What about your family? What are you doing? Where are you sacrificing? Where are you loving someone that's hard to love? But that's how we funnel it.
Yeah. And then your groups then actually sounds like have a pretty broad definition. Like,
Very broad.
It's not like a group has to be
Nope.
do these 3 things,
nope.
become a group for you guys. Like,
we help people grow, connect, serve, multiply. So grow in their love for Jesus, connect with others, serve in some way, capacity, maybe on a Sunday, maybe a specific call that you have for your group, and then multiply. Look for ways like, man, what's our hope? We want to be 2 groups at some point, or we this or that. So that's the only parameters.
Yeah.
They can look totally different. One group in the summers gets together and runs, and before they run, they spend time praying for each other, spend time encouraging each other, and then they go run together. One group, I'll never forget it, none of them were runners, and they ended up running a half marathon together. All I can remember is telling my wife, I'm so glad we were not in that group. That sounds like a terrible group to get. I was like, I don't even like small groups after hearing that. But just so cool to see that take place. But that's an area we have nothing figured out, and really doubling up our effort on that. And that's something that's probably one of my life songs, is just being Jesus right where you are. It's just a life song for me. Everybody's got a song inside of them. Mine is reaching a person who doesn't know Jesus and just being Jesus right where you are. Like, that's probably 2 of my songs that I sing. So all of us got songs that we sing. So again, it's that both and thing. Like, you can do both. How about this? So, yep.
You talk about leadership and small group leaders, and I'm interested in training, and maybe some of you have experienced this or know about this. I've just heard recently about Trained Up Church, an online platform for canned training of sorts, or you can do your own.
Yep.
And I'm aware of some other ones as well. Do you use anything like that? Do you do your own training?
So we've done different things over the years, and there's no silver bullet to any of it. Have a great rest of the day. Alpha has got some great training materials. Like, they have some great videos that you can watch, and everything's free with Alpha. We've done like day trainings here and there. Something that we've done this year that's probably worked the best. So we brought in the former groups person from North Point. Her name's Kristen Fry. I don't think she'd be that expensive to bring in. And she did an evening thing on training. We're hoping to have 2 trainings a year. And then we're hoping to meet with our small group leaders 3 times each semester. So we have 2 semesters, actually 3 semesters. So summer's 1, fall, spring. And so we try to meet with every small group leader 3 times and then have the 2 trainings. And so that's really our training, like basics from how to lead a group to the one-on-ones is how are you doing, what's working, what's not. Are you wanting to be a group leader? We've pushed people your way before and it's not worked. How can we help that? Another thing too, I just mentioned pushing people to groups. We challenge our group leaders to self-populate themselves. Let them own it. Again, instead of the church carrying the load, people are going to come oftentimes because of you and the people in your influence. And so again, I feel like we shove everything to the bigger church. Can you share this on stage? Mm-hmm. People aren't going to respond to a stage. They will respond to a one-on-one invitation. Going back to Kimberly Gass, she never asked for a stage spot. Instead, she's just talking with everybody she meets. Mm-hmm. Hey, would you want to get plugged in? Would you want to get plugged in? And she's just winsome and wonderful, and she cares for her volunteers, and people come. She explains the why every time. Like, hey, I just got to share this cool God story. I mean, Kimberly's just so good at doing that. So that's kind of our training. It's really simple. Kristen was awesome. We'll bring her in again because she just gave a lot of basic groundwork into things, but we keep it really simple. And the large group, this fall we didn't mention small groups at all. We mentioned large groups like for 4 or 5 weeks in a row, and off of the large groups are hoping to make them a funnel for small groups. So that's our approach. Get them in with a felt need, the basics of the faith. People want that. And marriage, it's a need. So it's about as simple as it gets. Again, we have nothing figured out. take everything. Just kind of figuring out what works. We've often created these grand plans of what we're going to do that never happen.
Yeah.
And then you just start filling holes, and it's amazing what happens.
Yeah.
Try to do a little bit of combination of planning and grace of Jesus. Just, it's kind of a mix of that. So, any other questions?
If someone wants to become a member of the church, is there a process?
Yeah, so we're actually trying to figure out how to do that right now. So in the past, and I feel like this has been a piece that's been missing, in the past we did something called Embrace 101 and then Embrace 201. And I really feel like something like that's missing. We rarely get asked about membership. Nobody even asks anymore. They just don't. They just want to know how they can grow in their love for Jesus. This is a piece that is missing, and I feel like it's a connection piece as far as even discipleship. So Embrace 101, we shared our vision, and we talked about worship and small groups. So and at the end of it, I challenged people to come back to Embrace 201, and Embrace 101 was one night long for an hour and a half, and we served root beer floats half in between.
Yes.
I love root beer floats, and they're simple, and they're tasty, and they're amazing. Awesome. So
What kind of repair?
usually A&W root beer. Yeah, I'm losing. I'm like, A&W? Texas A&M? No, that's not right. So that was Embrace 101. And then in 201, we talked about the serve piece. And this is about as Methodist as we get. We talked about our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, our witness. I mentioned that in the report a couple of times. I don't know if you've ever heard about your prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness, but we talk about it every single time. So that.
Do you really talk about it like that, or do you talk about how you grow with God in prayer and you serve with God?
We should, but we don't. We're still prayers, presence, gifts, service, witness. We fail. So we just walk through those things.
Definitely not failing.
Yeah. So we just go through those. That's what we've done in the past. And this is kind of that in between. Growth is an interesting thing, like scalability. So it's like again, early on, you wanted your wedding done. You got the best experience ever. The lead pastor is going to do your wedding. And now we're on the opposite side of that of like, who's doing my wedding? And I emailed and I haven't heard back in 6 months. So it's kind of those things of like scalability, what works, and even the changes of stuff. I personally, and this is hands-off leadership, I would have never dropped Embrace 101 and 201. That was gold for me. But it hasn't been that at every campus, and I know I'm different because we even marketed it as, hey, if you want a chance to connect with Adam, that's what the poll was. So I would have a room with 200 people in it. So again, I had an unfair advantage. Campus pastors are going to get a good response. They're not going to get that response. Because I had people who just wanted to connect with me. And so, but intentionality. So early on, so what I would do is I would have that. Everybody would share their story. And that sometimes, and I got done an hour and a half no matter what. Everyone would share their story. There was one night, the introductions went 45 minutes long. What's your name, hometown, how you heard about Embrace, and why you decided to come back. Basically, and when we got done, I would say, and some of you might be frustrated that we've done introductions and we only have this much left, but I've just told you who Embrace is. You've just heard who Embrace is. And then I followed it up with Encounter, Compassion, Embrace, Run, mentioning everything they just mentioned. We came, and there was just something different. Mention that. We came, and we've never felt so welcomed. In Compassion, mention that. I'm like, I just heard all of you. I mean, it was just like bam, bam, bam. And then afterwards, so I'd connect with them during the root beer floats. We'd get started again, and then we'd be done in an hour and a half. They'd sign up. We'd invite them to the next 201. That night, by myself, this is just the hustle in me. As soon as everybody left, I went to my computer. I friended every single person on Facebook that came. I would search them using every nerdy way I could. I never had a person ever say, don't do that, or weird. We had now spent an hour and a half together, and we were friends. And now you got to see the real version of me, because that's me on Facebook. It's me. And it's like, if you didn't fall in love with this church, now you know that I'm a real person. And we went picking apples this last week. I posted about picking apples and how our kids had meltdowns. And I ate an apple that had a gigantic worm in it, only realizing it afterwards. I was like, that's nasty. And then, but so like that just connects with people. And so, I mean, after the Embrace 101, we'd see again every single time. But so we're trying to figure that piece out, is how to do that. But that was, so you did Embrace 101, Embrace 201, and then we just had a simple covenant that listed prayers, presence, gifts, service, witness. I commit to these things, and you will remember. That was membership. I'm not really sure what Embrace is doing right now, though. So we're doing something. We got a plan. Isn't it crazy, though, how much of ministry is that, though? It's like, oh, what's the series for Christmas? Baby Jesus coming to earth? Yeah. With a camel. My favorite series we ever did for Christmas, this worked out just perfectly. And it was another just huge uptick. The series was called We're Expecting. And Beck and I had just had a baby in November. And so we sent out like baby announcements, like when you have a baby. So that was our invitation to everybody. And then we talked about like this baby changes everything. Because so often we have Christmas and then we go back to normal. We have a baby and then go back to normal. I just got to say, after we had every one of our kids, normalcy was no longer existence. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like now you have this human being that depends on you and there's no test before you take it home. And so just talking about what Jesus does, that was probably my favorite series. And me in a delivery room, just so you know, I am the worst person ever to have in a delivery room. So my poor wife, thank God she's done having kids because I pushed her to the edge each time. I was a nervous wreck. She's like, you're not the one that's pushing out a basketball, buddy. You know, like, so every single time I had a nurse say, Dad, are you doing okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling great. Why? Because you look pretty white. Like, you might want to sit down. So I was a liability in a delivery room, so, which provides great stories. So for a series called We're Expecting. So any other questions, though?
Do you have an arm for how you do student ministry, or is that kind of just encapsulated in the
So how we're doing?
Like I hear there's the children's ministry because you had mentioned her gaining volunteers and stuff. Is there an arm of how youth are reached?
Yep. So one of the things we did on a Sunday is we added a 4th and 5th grade class. That was a huge piece because we felt like the 4th and 5th graders were getting lost. They're too old to do any of the kid stuff. And then there's 2 years that they don't want to go to anything. It's like youth isn't ready for me and all that. And 4th and 5th graders, they're vocal. And they'll start saying, I don't want to go to church. Mm-hmm. And also, man, like they're at an age where they're starting to process bigger things of life. And so I think that's a piece that's huge to figure out is 4th and 5th grade. Is something, so youth, so right now our youth is, I shared with somebody earlier, it's an interesting season. One of the people we lost was our youth person this summer. So 2 out of our 4 campuses have the best youth program I've ever seen. So full-on teaching, worship groups the night of. Our T campus, youth is exploding. At their kickoff, the middle school principal, who's also the head basketball coach, and the high school principal were both on our dunk tank. This Wednesday night, we're using the high school gym for an event. And I said, how do we pay for that? And Travis is like, no, they just gave it to us. And I was like, okay. And he's like, they said we can have it anytime we want for free. And I was like, are you kidding me? So it's really solid. Right now, they're together, even though it's huge. In T, I know they're going to separate the two because we're losing high schoolers by having them with middle school. So we're going to separate out the two. Another campus that's doing really, really well is going through the Alpha, actually, the student Alpha. They don't have a great upfront person right now for the teaching end of things. We're trying to figure out how we can utilize that person at other campuses because he's so dynamite. one of the sharpest young men I've seen. Super grounded, humble, deep love for Jesus, deep understanding of God, His Word, everything. So we're trying to figure that out as well. So it's constant learning. It's been an interesting season. So our youth, we've really only had youth for the last 2.5, 3 years. Because before that, even though we had thousands of people, like 4 years ago, we didn't have anybody old enough to have a youth person. I mean, you'd have thousands of people and no youth. And if you did, it was a young mom that got pregnant really, really young. And that's why she had a high schooler, because it's like, nobody's old enough to have a high schooler yet. And so that's finally starting to change. But for a season, it was almost bizarre. I'm like, is there anybody over 4th grade? Nope. So it's kind of interesting how we're late in the game of youth. That's a lot of ninjas. A lot of camels too. but no, we're learning that. But youth, I really feel like we got a good game plan for that. Now it's just really pushing into it. And I see it like just exploding. I just posted about my son actually yesterday. And so, it was just really, really cool. Just somebody sent me a picture of my son in the back row just worshiping. And so cool just to see that. So it's weird what changes when all of a sudden the pastor's kid is a 6th grader and is in youth. All of a sudden youth becomes a high priority. That's where it's sometimes nice to know a guy, I know a guy who will get that covered. Maybe myself, So, yeah. But youth is where I came to Christ, and it's huge. So and then trying to bridge the gap from youth to college. And I think we do that well at Embrace. We have one of the colleges in town where I went to school, not like really a Christ-centered school at all. I swear we have half the school coming to Embrace now. It's so awesome. It's a Lutheran school, and they're all coming. This last week, I was like, is half of Augie here right now? This is crazy. So, but you reach a few popular, fun kids, and it's amazing how quickly that can draw a whole wave of people. So it's just kind of neat to see how God moves in that way. So, and I think part of that is talking in an honest way, talking about pornography, talking about sex, talking about whatever. College kids are wrestling with it. I've done it, and now I feel guilty. What does God have to say about this? Because it isn't as fun as it used to be. Like when you're honest with stuff, people, that'll draw them because they're looking for real and honest. So, yeah.
You've had a conversation with your church about what's happening with the United Methodist Church.
So.
I want to know.
So here's kind of what's interesting. I would probably say, this is weird to say in a room full of Methodists, I would struggle to fill out the report if I still had to fill out the report. I would say probably half of Embrace, maybe 60% has no idea that we're Methodist. So, which is kind of a hallelujah, and that wasn't an intentional thing. That was a hill I died on early on. This is like the still small voice inside of you. So we live in a high Catholic, high Lutheran area. Again, I was baptized ELCA Lutheran. All my extended family's Catholic. It's not, if you were to leave those, you're not leaving church, you're leaving your family. Like you're leaving identity. Like you are a Lutheran, not because you go to church, but because your last name is what it is. And you're Catholic because your last name is what it is. And so I'm like, why are we creating another bar for people to climb over? And like, United what? I don't even know what that is. Like, and I actually, well-known church planters in church world, all of them said I should keep it. But none, because they thought there's brand name and there's knowledge of it. And I think there is in the South. And South Dakota, there's not. There is for Lutheran and Catholic. If I was Lutheran or Catholic, I would be very proud Lutheran and Catholic because we'd get people, but not Methodist. And it was just, I just didn't want to create a barrier. Like I wanted to live out the open doors end of things. And which is kind of ironic that I was getting so much heat for United Methodist and Across in Flame. But I'm so glad now. And even halfway through it, I almost feel like United Methodist, this is one of the sad things about us. It's almost like the word Democrat or Republican. It's like a hot button issue. You know, it's like the only person who gets excited about United Methodist is the person who had a really sweet grandma who was United Methodist. Everybody else, they're like, what the heck does that mean? To conservatives, oh, it's the liberals, and to the liberal, like progressives or liberals, oh, it's conservatives. You know, it's like everybody, it's one of those terms that I feel like no one really likes, and everyone kind of, what does it mean, and hates, sadly. And now through this, I'm so glad, because we saw the brunt of the ELCA and what happened. I mean, total annihilation of churches. My home church got torn in two. My home church that I grew up in before we switched to the Methodist church in high school. I mean, it just destroyed churches. And so I'm so glad it's not been a flag that we fly high, which is interesting to say when my bishop's Bishop O, but he totally gets it. He's never one time said, you need to fly this flag or blah, blah, blah. He doesn't care. He wants to reach people for Christ. And which is pretty awesome that he's the main guy. I'm like, I want to follow you even more. And so yeah. So we haven't. I think our lead team, we're such a unique church. We're just unique. I think this is a safe place. We're conservative around the topic of marriage. And yet, I don't know this for certain, we probably have the highest population of homosexuals in the conference. Like even percentage-wise. Only person I've ever said, basically they're not welcome here, is a guy who got in my face that we had two guys holding hands in our entryway, and I said I was cool with it. It's a messy thing to try to be like Jesus, and we're far from being Jesus, but Travis has actually said, it'd be so much easier if we were just like loud about being conservative and whatever. And he's like, it'd be a lot easier if we were just cool with homosexuality too. He's like, trying to do truth and grace, again, this is, you guys can agree to disagree, that's a messy thing. And I'm like, it really is. But I said, I love it. A guy just moved away from town. His name's Tony, and he ran one of our cameras every single week. He just moved like a week and a half ago. I went to his going away party. Some Sundays he'd come and he'd still have mascara and stuff on from being a drag queen the night before. And I told him, I said, we wouldn't be the same church we are without you. And he had many conversations with the campus pastors, we rarely talk about it from stage, but we'll be honest about where we are if you ask us. And yet he loved Embrace. And his birthday, he celebrated his birthday with us and brought cookie cake to all of us and all this kind of stuff. And outside the service, he said, I said, hey, how's it going? It's your birthday and stuff. And he's like, it's been a really hard week. And I said, oh, really, man? I'm sorry. And he's like, my parents sat me down. And he's like, they've known I've been bisexual for how long? And my dad told me that I'm the biggest disappointment in our family's history. So I was like, man. I said, well, that sucks. And he's like, yeah, it was just really hard to have your dad say that. And you might agree, I shared the truth part a little bit. I said, I can understand. I was like, he's an old school dude, you know? And so like, he's probably trying to figure it out. And I said, but that really sucks. My dad said something like that to me, it'd crush me. And I said, Tony, I just want you to know, you're the furthest from being a disappointment to us. And I said, we wouldn't be the same church without you. Like, we wouldn't even be able to run the camera without you. And he started laughing. And later that day, he posted, tagged me in it. In between like drag queen pictures, him behind the camera taking a selfie. and said, so thankful it's my birthday and I get to celebrate with my church family Embrace. If you're looking for a church to call home, this is it. And then when he moved away, he must have posted about Embrace 5-6 times. And that's for me, like, not even getting into denomination stuff. Like, I love that we can agree to disagree and still worship the same God. And man, like, I always say the hot button issues at Embrace are not homosexuality, it's breastfeeding and like homeschool or not. We actually don't have a ton of homeschoolers. I'm trying to think of that thing I always bring up. Natural birth or not natural birth. I was like, you want to get really intense? Don't mention Obama or Trump. Mention if you had drugs or no drugs when you had a baby. I was like, it'll be an arm wrestling match. I was like, ladies, punching people. So, but it's true. And so, like, I just think, like, I just think it's really rad. So, and even just to be able to share, like the, as quickly as I can. So this kid, 2 guys are holding hands in our entryway. One of them is one of our campus pastor's brothers. So they come in, they're holding hands. Somebody comes with me. Hey, we got 2 guys holding hands in the entryway. What do you think? And I said, are they making out? And he said, no. I was like, they're not making out? And he said, no. And I said, well, if anybody was making out in our entryway, I'd tell them to cool their jets a little bit. But I said, I don't care who they are. Like, even if it was a married couple, I'd be like, okay, get a room, guys. But I said, if they're just holding hands, I'm cool with that. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, we'll probably take heat over it. Who cares? So it goes on with the day. So this kid leaves. This college kid comes up to me as he's walking away, asks where I'm at with homosexuality. I'm like, oh, gosh. Every time you're asked, you never know where they're from. Yeah. And if they're trying to set you up to screw you over. You know, both sides. Yeah. I'm like, don't set me up for a sound clip that you can throttle me with. And the bigger church, the more of a target just to sling you through the crap, which sucks. And both sides just kind of piss me off, to be honest with you. I'm like, shut up, you know? So, but I was like, man, I like the quick answer, I was like, man, I'm embarrassed by it. I'm not proud of it. I was like, to answer your question, first off, anybody's welcome here. I'm saying from the last lead pastor, everybody's welcome here. I was like, homosexuality, I was like, I just don't see it as God's best for us. Again, I'm embarrassed by my answer and whatever. So he's like, okay, and walks away. And I was like, okay, I don't know if you're going to I don't know, what are you going to do to me? Like, as he's walking away, he didn't even give me an answer. I'm like, well, what do you think? Let's have a conversation. What do you think? Walks away. So comes back later at night. And by the way, I've had lesbian couples ask me to marry them after I've sat down with them and explained where we are, which I think is a huge badge of honor. That even if you're hearing where I am, like, you're still wanting me to do your wedding, not with any like ill intent or trying to set up me for anything. So anyways, the evening service comes. This kid, I totally forgot about him. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know if I don't know. So after the 6 o'clock service, so he'd been to church in the morning, he came back. All of a sudden, I'm in my office after the service. He comes in my office. I'm standing in my door, walks past me, and is behind my desk now, looking at me. And I was like, I didn't even remember who he was. He's like, I have another question for you. And I was like, another question for you? I don't even know who you are. And he's like, I asked you about homosexuality this morning. And I was like, oh, yeah, dude, I was wondering what was going on. And he's like, I got another question for you. How do you stand yourself pastoring a church filled with people damned to hell? And I was like, whoa. And I'm always weird in those circumstances. I was like, whoa, that's not another question. That's a big question. Man, another thing, like, why do we cast stone at other pastors and stuff? And that's something I've been really thinking a lot about too. Even people that I'm like, I don't know what to think about that, but I don't attend their church, so I don't have anything to think about that. So even the other day, someone was railing on Furtick or something like that, and I've never been in the same room as Furtick, so I've never talked to him personally. Someone was railing on him, and one of my friends called and said, Furtick's the reason I went to seminary. I went to seminary because of Furtick. And so he's like, I literally went to seminary because of him. He was the reason that I went. And so it's easy to throw rocks at different people and whatever, but I'm like, What if we were quicker to cheer people on would be a much better story to tell.
Amen.
Kind of interesting. It's crazy. Anything else?
Thank you for sharing your passion of Jesus.
Yeah.
You hear a lot of leadership speakers and wonderful, we can learn a lot, but you've been so that vulnerable. This is why.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm grateful for that. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Care if I pray for us? Is that all right?
I love that. Yeah.
Gracious Lord, Heavenly Father, we're thankful for you. And I'm just thankful for today. I'm thankful for this time. And more than learning today, I feel like it's been a worship service. So we just thank you for your grace, your patience, your love, your kindness. We're grateful it's your kindness that draws us to yourself. Lord, I just lift up my brothers and sisters that you would remind them of their first love and just the first time that they fell in love with you. God, would you just keep our ear close to your chest? Would we hear your heartbeat, the things that break your heart? Would we just, before anything, realize your heart and your love for us, not as pastors, but as your sons and daughters? Lord, I pray for our churches. We don't want to pastor country clubs. We don't want to pastor museums. We want to pastor churches, the hope of the world, that a world is so desperately in need of. And so, God, I pray that you'd put a fire inside of our churches, a fire inside of us, inside of our staffs, inside of our boards, that we would just set everything aside and run just radically and relentlessly after you and the call that you have on our church lives, on us individually. Lord, just coming out of the season I've been in, would you pray, I just pray protection over us. Protection over our own foolishness, protection over gossip, division. Just ask you just protect us, Father. Just watch over us, guide us, lead us. Would we be so in tune with you that every step we take would be led by you? Lord, again, we're just thankful for who you are and who you've been and who you continue to be in our lives. We pray all these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.